Shalom. Our Torah portion for this week is Devarim. And with Sedra Devarim, we begin the fifth and final book of the Torah, also known as Devarim, or in English, Deuteronomy. Now, the English name is rather interesting as it comes from the Greek Deuteronomos, which means the second giving of the law. And sure enough, we see the second appearance of the Ten Commandments in this book. The first appearance of the Ten Commandments is found in the book of Exodus. But it's not only the Ten Commandments that are reiterated in this book, the book of Deuteronomy. We also see a number of events that played out while our people were in the desert for those 40 years between the time they left Egypt and the time they arrived on the eastern bank of the Jordan River, preparing to invade the promised land. Now, what I want to draw your attention to today is chapter 1, verse 12 of the book of Deuteronomy. Let's take a look at what it says in the Hebrew and in the English. Echa esa levadi, tarchechem umaschechem varivchem. How can I bear unaided the trouble of you and the burden and the bickering? Now, this is Moses complaining of the Israelites and how they caused him a lot of trouble. And specifically in two ways they caused him trouble. They were a burden to him, and they were contentious. They were burdensome and contentious. And we'll get back to how this played out in the Midrash in a moment. But I want you to consider something. This Sedra is read almost every year right before Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, which we will be observing this coming week. But on the 9th day of Av, Tisha B'Av as it's known in Hebrew, we commemorate the destruction of the first and the second temples. The first temple that had been built by Solomon and the second temple that had been built by Herod were both destroyed many hundreds of years apart on the 9th day of Av. And interestingly, the first word of this Torah portion is, the verse that I just read is Echa. Echa. And that is the name of the book that we read on Tisha B'Av. We read the book of Lamentations, which is known in Hebrew as Echa. And there is an old custom that's rather interesting regarding this Torah portion, and specifically this verse, verse 12, as it relates to Tisha B'Av. Now, there's a certain kind of cantillation, a certain method of chanting all of the books of the Torah. And week in and week out, we use that system of cantillation. And we use that weekly system of cantillation for Sedra Devarim, except for this verse. When we come to this verse, we chant it with the same cantillation, and it's a very mournful cantillation, the same cantillation that we use when we read the book of Lamentations on Tisha B'Av. So there is a real connection between this Torah portion, specifically this line, and Tisha B'Av. The Midrash speaks of those two terms, burdensome and contentious, masachem varivchem, as referring to the generations of the first temple and the second temple. The rabbis of old asked the question, why were the temples destroyed? the two temples. Why were they destroyed? They concluded that the first temple was destroyed because the people had drifted away from the teachings of Torah. They didn't observe Shabbat. They didn't engage in tzedakah, in charity. They didn't teach their children Torah. And they actually engaged in idolatry. And for this reason, they became burdensome to God. And God allowed the temple to be destroyed. God took away his providence over the temple and allowed it to be destroyed by the Babylonians. But the other temple is related to this word contentiousness, rivchem, this contentiousness of the people in the generation of the second temple. Let's take a look at what it says in Adin Steinsaltz's Talmudic commentary on Baba Metzia 30b, page 30b. In it, he records, Eile al shadanu ba-din Torah, only because they judged in it, that is, in the generation of the second temple, according to the law of the Torah. This saying of Rabbi Yochanan is one of a series of sayings dealing with the question of why the second temple was destroyed, even though most of the Jews of Jerusalem in that period kept the commandments. The sages also said that Jerusalem was destroyed because of sinat chinam, unjustified hatred, and because the citizens were not flexible enough to forego some of what they held to be their due. This inability to accept less than their due in every single case is what brought about the destruction of Jerusalem, both by human forces and as punishment from heaven. Similarly, the sages state that the destruction of Sodom came about because the people there attempted to create a society in which the laws were devoid of the concepts of mercy and compassion. So the first temple was destroyed because there wasn't enough Torah, because people weren't keeping the rules. The second temple was destroyed because the people applied the rules without compassion, without love, without mercy. They were ruthless with the rules. They created a lot of contention among themselves. No one could compromise. Everyone was an expert on the law. A society without compromise, without people trying to see the other person's opinion, creates contentiousness. This is a warning, I think, to us who are involved in religious life that yes, we have to have rules, and yes, we have to have principles, but we must apply those principles in religious life with a sense of mercy and tolerance. This rule or this warning could also apply to society in general. We live in a very contentious period in the history of our nation. Politics are so contentious these days, no one will, on the left or the right, is willing to compromise, something that I don't think is a good thing at all. And the Torah this week suggests that it is not a good thing. Well, I hope that you will read this Torah portion and come to your own conclusion. Shabbat Shalom.